Hello and welcome to Macro Mondays, powered by the Gokhstein News Network. I'm your host, Landy, and today is December 22nd, 2025. And we're looking at, the Forex economic calendar right now because we do have at least some interesting, metrics that will be coming out for the U.S. As well as Canada, but more importantly, the United States here with some preliminary GDP quarter over quarter data. Now, the last read that we had for GDP was at 3.3%. For some reason on the chart here, it says the previous was 3.8. I do not believe that is true. And we did not get any, maybe on a preliminary projection, but the last read was in August at 3.3%. That is, that's the forecast. We must remember that we've been getting some blended reports lately because of the government shutdown here in the United States. I think that we will see a blended preliminary GDP report as well. And I just did want to call out that is something to be aware of during the Tuesday, the 23rd session. So also recall that on as we head over to Bitcoin here, that there is only a partial trading day on Wednesday this week, where I will not be doing a Wednesday update. But in fact, I will be skipping that as it is Christmas Eve. At least that's what I believe. Yeah, because Bitcoin won't be closing till 7 p.m. Eastern. So 0 UTC, and that's just not going to work out. So there will be no video on Wednesday, but there will be a video on Friday. So the Friday recap will go up after the close of day for crypto markets on Friday. But here in the United States, it's a half day essentially for traditional markets on Wednesday, and then Thursday there is no trading in session. So let's take a look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin is doing a whole lot of nothing in this range outside of rejecting kind of a midline right around $89,000 on the close. If we're looking at the actual swings, though, not too much has been happening. Every time Bitcoin has tried for above $90,000, it has gotten soundly rejected, including during the Monday session where it did trade up to 90,541.80 on spot. But it's still just trapped inside of this wider range, right around a weekly level on closes, with a little bit of a smaller deviation down to 85,460. But essentially right around $86,000, we have the one lower high close on the weekly. And then to the top side around 93.5. Where we did see this close come in just slightly below a weekly, which was a closing higher low. We'll take a look at that in just a moment. But more importantly, it is really about the top side dailies. On the way down, as Bitcoin was playing into the weekly areas and testing them as support, and while each one did eventually fail until we hit an $80,500 weekly, like almost to a T. Which is the last weekly that Bitcoin has found support outside of the right around $86,000 weekly lower high. It's just been trading sideways, and realistically on the daily here, it's been about the closing low of the range here, right around 84,684, and then a little bit of a closing structure. You could take either the bearish close here or the bear to bull close here. Right around that 94.5 or so. Bitcoin has tested to the top side, it's tested to the bottom side, and done a whole lot of nothing now for 31 closing days. And until we see Bitcoin break down with conviction, specifically, I would say, below 83.5 to 84 at these swings. Getting below 86, I'd be looking for tests to 83.5, 84 area as an area rather. And until we saw any kind of closes below there, I wouldn't be looking for much more. But if we did see closes below there, I'd look for expansion down to test the swing low here right around that weekly at 80,500 to another weekly at 78. Many of you already know when I pull up the weekly chart in just a moment here where those levels are. Anywhere below 78, I'm looking for mid 70s, maybe even lower 70s in play. To the top side, above 93.5, especially on closes, we'll have likely seen Bitcoin test back up to 90, 94 and above, into possibly 94 to 96. Then it's about $2,000 at a time, 94 to 96, 96 to 98, 98 to the 101 weekly, and possibly even up to the next weekly level above that at 102.5 would be kind of the name of the game. But I wanted to show you something interesting. If this low does hold, I do believe, meaning the low on a close, and this does not bar swings below it, but if this low holds up on a close at 80,500 or so, upside is more likely going to be the outcome eventually. And in this case, if we look at a fib extension with pulling from the top side swing here to the bottom, I wanted to show you how this kind of lines up to the upside. So if we do see this low hold on a close, and yes, that does allow for swings below it, even into that 78 to that 80,000, 80,500 area, or even lower on swings, to be quite honest. I would be looking to the top side here. And remember that 96 is a point of control. So 96 to 98 is kind of the name of the game, above, 94, right? And then it's 98 to 101. And if you look here, we have the one spot. We've got any swings above 96 that fail at the 1.168, which is 16.8% above this range here, would be 97 to 240, 250 area. But then above there, you see that we have 98 to 101. Now this 98 is almost $100,000. You see that the swings came in right on it, and the closes came in right on that 101, which is a weekly level as well. And then above there, we start getting into another area that's by a daily structure, which is a daily high area around 104.5 to 105, before getting up to a 1786. Now this is a 1618, and then 1786 was a sound rejection off of a weekly inside of a cluster of weeklies between 102.5 and 112. So I did want to pull this. This is a log scale fib on the daily. It's going to look a little bit different if you do linear, but I prefer log. So you'll just have to bear with me on that. I switched to linear below the daily if I'm doing specific trade setups, but in this case, I think this works out just fine to illustrate my point for confluent areas of interest as it relates to price action off of the current high side swing in this consolidation and that swing low that was set on that major weekly. And we can go ahead and look at those weeklies here. We can turn off this kind of local illustration here and turn on the weekly zones of interest. And you'll see that there's the $86,000 weekly. We got a closing deviation out of it, but no concerted push below this 83,884 to 83.5 area down there. And came right back inside of this to hit the swing, the common swing point. So this was a lower high at 86,000. And then we had a higher low on a close. So a lower high on a close and a higher low on a close for the weekly time frames. Between 86 and 93.5. And we have a common swing higher low and lower high, or wick higher low and lower high, right around $88,800 to $89,000. You see that Bitcoin was compressing in the top half of this range between the weeklies, and now it's in the bottom half. It keeps rejecting, getting above on closes. If we do see Bitcoin trading above right around 89, you can see the basis band, which is a 20 simple moving averages right there. Then I would look for it to, test up to that 90,000, 90,500. Above there, it's pretty safe to say that it can head up towards some daily levels around 92, but realistically, I'd be looking up to 93.5. You can see that the upper second standard deviation is up there. That's where and he kind of closes above, if we hadn't already tested 94.5 or 94 in this case to the point of control at 96, then I'd be looking for that. Anywhere above there, I'd be looking for expansion into this weekly zone between 98 and that 101. Go figure. Anywhere above there, I'd be looking for swings in lower term timeframes. If we didn't already try, I'd be looking for swings up to 102.5, possibly even 103.650 up here by another major longer term Fibonacci extension here at the 1272 at 103.650. And then above there, I'd be looking for a retest of this weekly zone inside of a wider weekly zone between 102.5 and 112. But that's that 107, 108. That would be a true retest of the high side structure on a weekly basis that was holding price up from a daily level that became a weekly higher low up here for the overall structure up top. Now to the downside, if we do see the lows dropped on a close, especially, we would get expansion. But again, not really anything interesting until we see, 84, 83.5 on a close. Then I'd be looking for considered expansion down to this weekly level where the swing low came in at right around 80,000, 80,500, 278. Anywhere below there, this would be an expansive mode, especially on, would be expansion into an area to test as support, but I'd be looking realistically anywhere below 78 to the mid 70s. And that's where we get the major higher low on the monthly. And then we're looking to topside structure over here. That's 73,835, $70,000 closing area. So realistically, that would be the mid to low 70s. But not a whole lot's happened, so not a whole lot to talk about there. Yeah, the longer this hangs out here, and I mentioned this on Friday, I'm starting to get the sneaking suspicion that, if this doesn't get continuation soon, and it can test down, by the way. Even from the weekly standpoint, this is the weekly Bollinger Band set. See the lower second is now coming in right at the low. Typically, when we see an expansion phase, this is not always the case, but typically when we see an expansion phase, upon initial expansion down, we get the closes below the lower second, sometimes even below the lower third, like we saw for one candle. And then, if price bounces or goes sideways, we usually see another test towards that lower second before a real bounce begins. Now, sometimes it can be a higher low, sometimes it can be a lower low, but I would be aware of that, especially if Bitcoin's getting sold off of this 89 on a close for the weekly and or continues to reject the top side of the weeklies around 93.5, 94K. Even if we get a giant swing up, doesn't matter where that swing goes. It's all about the close on the weekly. And in this case, if we were to see no weeklies closing above that can break out above this structure here at that 94,640, then I would be looking for a retest of wherever that lower second is as it relates to support. And you can see now the lower third is all the way down at just below $70,000, coming in at the prior all-time high at 69K. So I wouldn't rule that out, but I would also be on the other side potentially hunting for a trade. That doesn't mean that a long trade in this case. That does not mean that it cannot bounce from here and settle low. For the weekly to settle low, in this case a potential higher low, we would have to see closes come in above right around 90,400, 500 area. That would set a closing low. There is no closing low here. What we've done is we have lower low, lower high, potential higher low swing structure. If we want to see a low closed, we need to see it come in right around that 90,400 to 500 area. That would be a higher low swing. Then we look right back to the highs here on the weekly at that 90,640 and then potentially further to the upside to go and test some of the areas that Bitcoin broke down from. Otherwise, continuation is the name of the game, right? If it were to test below the lower second and especially close below it, it's getting expansion down into the next weekly zone with the potential for more. So, just understand kind of where Bitcoin is. Now, again, this is a short week. Next week will be a short week, and then it's the beginning of the new year. So, right now, one of the things that I am keeping an eye on as it relates to the weekly is getting back above the lower first here, wherever that is, whether it be this week, next week, or the week after, whatever that happens, no matter where the lower first is, looking towards the last lower high swing. Because then that would be a swing trend break, right? And in this case, if it were to come off of a higher low, then we're looking for a realistic test up to this higher low structure on the weekly, 98 to that 101, potentially more on the table there, towards the highs at 102.5 on a close, and then 104.5. You saw that there was some major levels in there. That's also right around the basis band on the weekly. Anywhere above there, we can start looking for this 107, 108. Then we have the 109 and 112 area. So a big cluster of weeklies overhead between the highs over here and the lows over here. And that's where, whether the bounce comes from here off of a higher low swing or whether we get another move down, that's what I would be aware of as it relates to this current ongoing move to the downside. So this was a trend break. We had the uptrend here, a trend break. And realistically, I've spoken about this a few times, and I've shown it on the chart here. What you have to be aware of with a trend break is a lower high. Then the confirmation, that would be your trend reversal setup, this lower high or wherever that would come in. By the way, this is just an example. Don't take this as this is what I think is going to happen. This is just purely for example's purpose. That would be your trend reversal setup on a longer term time frame, like a weekly. Your confirmation would be of a trend shift to the downside, and confirmation of the trend reversal setup would be closing below the swing low here, which would be at the 80,500 area. So because as it stands right now, what Bitcoin would need to do to make this a deviation from here, just a deviation of trend, it would have to just shoot right back to the top side and take out the highs, right? That is a lower likelihood. The other thing that you could potentially see play out, and something to be aware of, even if there is a lower high setup, whether it be this guy here, down here, or it bounces up further and tries it for a lower high. And when I say lower high down here, I do mean this structure right here with this the 94,640 high, right? This could be completed and considered a lower high technically below 87.5. I would need to see it drop, 83.8, 84K, but realistically, if it closed anywhere below 87,565, which it has not yet, it would be a technical lower high in a close. But even if we saw a lower high that popped up, or down here, continuation of trend, right, and validation of that setup for a trend reversal setup in this case would be closing below the low. The thing that you have to be aware of is that if we got a higher low as it related to a lower high, that's where you get you get a trend reversal setup invalidation, where you get a higher low that would be your invalidation, right? And we're kind of in no man's land at this point right now. So coming into the end of the year and the beginning of next year, how fitting is that, right? So one of the things that I'm really keenly aware of is some of the counter trend signals at the moment. This is a regular Stochh, not a Stochh RSI, has turned up from the extremes. It can also stay down here in the extremes for an extended period of time, but I am keeping an eye on this. Why am I keeping an eye on this? Because if we do see closes above that 94,640 on a weekly, this signal will be confirmed and we will have already tested up, or will test up most likely, in the subsequent weekly candles. This is coming from a pretty low level. And in this case for Bitcoin, we could see a significant bounce. That doesn't mean that it's going to successfully reclaim on the weekly closes, but we could see a very significant bounce. I'm not even entertaining that until I see, this as a valid counter trend signal until I see closes above 94,640 on the weekly. Just want to make that very, very, very clear. Last thing that I'm actually going to touch on, traditional markets rallied a little bit. They got a nice gap up. More importantly, I want to talk about what I talked about last week, and that is commodities. I think it's a little bit more interesting because silver did get very close to the $70 call that I had last week. And then I talked a bit about, I think we got right up to 69.44. So, I've been trading silver for a long time. Also been holding silver for a very, very long time, as well as gold, which made a new all-time high. But $70 is on the board very clearly here. We can see just above 70. We have the upper second standard deviation, just below $71 per ounce, with the potential for $74, $75 on the board above there. Now, that's going to be, it's very close to the edge where I think that we could be seeing a correction coming soon. Whether that happens this week or during the first part of January remains to be seen, but I am watching it very closely. We did get gold with a beautiful, beautiful move up on the daily here. So we saw the rejections right around the highs here. I told you what my criteria was for setting a high. We did not see that occur. We just saw two dojis right back to back above the upper first, still in very bullish position for the highs. And we saw it just rip right through. So we saw the high of yesterday come in at 44,450 or so, 44.49, and now pushing up to a high today of 44.69. Gotta love the memes, right? With the potential for 4,500 to this 2,414 right around 45.33 on deck now. So big area of interest. Could swing above there to 45.50. Wouldn't be out of the question. I'm going to look at weeklies this Friday for this and silver. We had a beautiful bounce off of an area. I don't often show oil, but we had a beautiful bounce off of a big weekly zone, and of course, by virtue of that being a weekly zone, a daily zone for oil, right around the between the 51.76 and the 55.72 that I have here for U.S. oil. Now this is just because I've tracked this. It's WTI crude oil, so it's CFDs. Now this is something. This is something to be aware of if this bounces aggressively coming into next year. This is going to have some inflationary effects if it continues to bounce, especially with where natural gas is. So just pay close attention. I will just quickly just run through Dow on the daily right back to one of the key areas that I had marked. We haven't seen a close above, but if we do see a close above the 48,431, I'd be looking for the all-time highs where that upper second standard deviation is coming in. Of course, now it has to hold the basis band right around that 47,830, 825 area. Otherwise, it's going to head down to this next bigger zone right around 47.5 to 47,240, 250 area. Would be right around where I'm looking. Yes, it can swing above or below that, front run it or swing below it, but really on a close is where I'd be looking. And that would only really occur on closes below 47,850 or so. That's what I'd be looking for the basis there. NASDAQ, nice gap up. We did get a bearish candle close though. In this case, it's going into a compression, which is to be expected over a holiday week. So we're starting to see that coming into it, we had the big rally up off the lower low. And then as it relates to that lower low, we have a higher low structure in place, but it's not an attractive one. This is actually a pretty bearish structure as it stands right now, but it has the potential above the upper first here, which is right where this bearish candle open came in and right around 25,663. That's the upper first. I'd be looking for the local highs to get run around 25,830 to the upper second, somewhere around 25,950, 960, maybe even 26,000, and then try to go for the actual highs above there at 26,182, 26,2 area. To the downside, it's got to hold essentially this close at 24,650 or so. Otherwise, it's going to go test this lower low. SPY. SPY actually closed okay. We had a bullish hammer again. Bands are swooping in for the compression, and it's about getting above that 685, 686 to test the actual highs here at 689, 690, and then potentially go for more up to that the all-time high, which is just right there. It's right there at 689.70, so 690 above there. I'm looking 692 to 695, and it needs to hold the actual low. If it does drop 680, I would look for the lower first around 675 to the low here at 670, 671 to get tested by that lower second standard deviation. Anywhere below there, we're looking for things to fall pretty aggressively into this little zone down here on expansion between 660 and 665, 66 area. So that's going to be it for me today. I will be back with a video on Friday. I hope that you all have a wonderful holiday week and a wonderful Christmas. Merry Christmas to those that celebrate. And I will talk to you on Friday during the Friday recap, or wrap up, I should say, the Friday wrap up. Please like and share this video out there if you did find this informative and helpful in any way. And keep an eye on my page and the Gockstein page, as well as David Gockstein. Lots of interviews. Big chat with Saylor. So David talked with Saylor. If you haven't watched that, Michael Saylor. Really, David had, obviously I'm a little biased, but David had really great questions that I think opened up a lot of conversation that I haven't heard Michael Saylor talk about. So if you haven't watched that, please go do. It's on David's page. I believe Michael Saylor also has it pinned as well. And yeah, so take care of yourself. I'll talk to you again on Friday. With all of that said, Landy out. Take care.